All right, if we could have the panelists come on up. I'm going to introduce you all to our panelists. So normally we'd give you a 5-minute break. We're not going to do that. We're just going to roll right in. So my name is Michelle Payne. I'm your moderator for this evening, and I want to introduce to you our panel. First, we have Dr. George W. Woods, an Oakland-based psychiatrist. There's a lot to say about Dr. George from University of Utah School of Medicine. He is past president, International Academy of Law and Mental Health. And most importantly, he's here to talk with us about this very, very important topic. So please welcome Dr. George Woods. And I also want to introduce to you a brother who, when I first met him, he was giving me a workshop, a training on emotional intelligence. And this is a brother who grew up in East Oakland, Sobrani, I don't know if you're familiar. Brookfield, see, I'm not familiar. But there's similarities. There's similarities. And this brother turned his life around after dealing with what all the young bloods deal with in those neighborhoods and created not only a model and authored 3 books, but created a pathway for people in general, but especially black people, to embrace their emotional intelligence. So give it up to D.B. Bedford. And before we jump into the questions and the panelists, I'll share with you all an experience that I had around emotions. A few years ago, my life went through significant turmoil, and I had to work really hard for about 9 months to get myself on my feet, get an apartment, get a job, get a bunch of things in place, and it was tough. And what I did was I focused on the relations, the loved ones, the friends, the work that I've been doing all of these years, and just poured myself in like I normally would do into helping others. And doing what I had to do. I was exercising, I was taking vitamins, I was doing everything I needed to do, and I was suffering. I was in some serious pain. And being, trained as a therapist, I said, well, I'm exercising, I'm eating right, I'm writing stuff down, I'm journaling. There was one thing missing. It was like, well, Michelle, did you deal with your emotions? And I hadn't. And so, like my left brain self, I scheduled some time. There's this one Stevie Wonder song that is amazing. So I made myself cry. I created a space. I turned off my phone. I turned on the song, and I thought about my stuff. And the tears flowed. And before that, it had only been Disney movies, and at the very end, that could ever draw a Denzel tear out, right? But I sobbed. And the shame that comes with that was quickly replaced with this overwhelming sense of being human, of being a person, right? And recognizing the next day and immediately after crying, and just like that, it stopped. And I never felt so human as after I cried. So when, and props to Mignon. Let's give Mignon a hand for doing the majority of the detail work on this event. It was a lot. But I just wanted to share that story, and I want to launch us into the wonderful discussion that we've prepared for you all today. So first question is to DB. So DB, growing up, what was your experience as a young boy when it related to what you were told about crime?
So I guess my first experience, first thing comes to mind is, growing up in East Oakland, and as a young person, when I first got to Brookfield, um, you had to fight. Like you walk to the store, like they want to see what that starter jacket look like. They want them shoes. They want your bike. So you didn't have no choice but to, get down and dirty. And I think about when I first got there, though, I wasn't really, I was scared. It was unfamiliar to me. And I remember one of the first times I ran back to the house by getting chased. I remember running up in the house, trying to get away. And then my father was like, boy, you better get your ass back out there and fight. And I understand now what he was trying to say. He was trying to get me to go out there and stand up like a man. But the problem was I wasn't a man. I was a young boy. And so I didn't have any opportunity to even process what that was. I had to get out there and fight. I learned very quickly in Brookfield, either you're going to be the lion or the gazelle. So, I chose to be the lion. And with that, that means putting emotions to the side, and you lead with, your positive emotions to the side. You lead with the negative ones, which is mostly anger or fear. So my early, as far as I can remember, I just don't think, or if you got a whooping, anybody here got a whooping before? Right? So, you like they were saying in the film, you get a whooping, and you getting your behind whooped, and they telling you better stop crying. It's like, what kind of shit is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you keep crying, you keep getting more of a whooping. So, I mean, you kind of put, you kind of put in a box. And how I was raised, they say, pressure busts a pipe or make diamonds. And that was a lot of pressure growing up. So that's my first experience with emotions.
Thank you, DB. No, hold that, because I want to ask you a question. You got the next one. So, in your experience as a psychologist, based on what DB was saying about the messages he got, give us sort of an analysis of what that's about, and what are some pivots or adjustments we would make as a community.
What is that about? Can you hear me? Okay. What is that about? First of all, before I really say that, I just want to comment on what an amazing show we just watched. I felt like getting up and saying, well, it's over. I can walk out of here right now. Because there was so much that was rich and true and hard and thoughtful. And so when I think of what it was about and what you described, what it's been many of us of our experiences, there are some code words in what we saw today that I want to go back and discuss. One of them, which actually came up in Billy Porter's conversation, but I think really pertains to when we talk about anger, it's really shame. The amount of shame that we all experience, and for many of us, it turns into anger. But where did that anger first start from? And so often that anger starts from shame. Not only the shame that may occur within our community, but the shame that we experience on the street. The shame that we experience going to the McDonald's. The shame that we experience in preschool when somebody looks at us and they say, you look like poop. You know what I mean? Because we're done. So it's that shame that then gets translated into anger, gets translated into isolation, gets translated into depression, and the sense that somehow we are not as good, not as strong, not as healthy, but we're not as. And then we have to fight our way out of that morass. We have to fight our way out into the light of why I'm here, wellness. Not pathology, but wellness, to fight our way back into health.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. And Frank, let's again give it up for such a wonderful film that you produced. A lot of segments that touch upon the whole profile, right? We covered all the different aspects of black maleness. But I want to ask you, what did your participation in this film inform you about your own evolution in expressing emotions as a man?
Well, that's a powerful question. First, I just want to say thank you guys for coming out tonight. You know, making that film or those episodes, you know, I was watching Billy, and I remember when I interviewed all those people, and Billy just broke down. I mean, I don't think he expected for that to happen. I didn't expect for it to happen when I was talking to him. But first of all, mental health is not a destination, it's a journey. Just because you're successful, well-known, or you got money, or you got girls, or whatever it may be, you still have those issues. And obviously some of the people that you talked about, Charlamagne and different people, dealt that. But for me, it's good that my son can watch that. It's good that there's young ladies in here, because I think the biggest thing is that the black women in your life need to help you do that, you know, and give you that space. Coming from the world of hip-hop, from which I kind of came from before I started making television, the whole thing is you got to be hard. You got to be a G. You got to be a gangster. You know what I mean? You got to be a thug. You know, that's promoted the bad boy. And I think for me, growing up in Oakland, being able to give that to, you know, my job is to take a picture of something, right? I take a picture, and I let you look at it. I don't tell you what's in the picture or whatever. I just tell you, you know, I go do all of this, and I bring it back. So for me, it was, even though I knew some of this stuff and obviously produced it, it's like an ongoing therapy session. It's like, imagine if you get to just keep going to a big, you know, therapy session with some of the more famous black men. Shout out to my boy Sway, Billy, Daytwan, all the people in there. It was powerful. I mean, I started to cry when Billy cried. It's not like I'm just there. I mean, I love that he cried, because that was great TV. But no, that was great. I cried some more. No, but I think it's just, you know, for me, I use my life as a tool. You know, and I think that I'm very transparent. I went through a lot growing up in Oakland, and I used this film, this little thing, to teach you things. And so that's what that was. That was me giving black men who I know, who my brothers might call me up, or, hey, I'm fucked up today, or damn, I don't feel good, or friends of mine, audience, people have lost family members, or mental health. I did a show called Cop Watch. I don't want to talk too long. Cop Watch America, you should watch it. And it's about young activists, anti-police brutality activists. It aired on BET. And when I went around with all these activists, and I watched police in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Atlanta, all over, deal with situations, take a guess the number one thing that police deal with on a day-to-day basis: mental health. Most of those people that I saw in those situations had mental health issues that they needed to be addressed, not police coming in with guns ready to fight. None of those police had the training to deal with these people who domestic abuse, a knife, they had an argument with their wife or whatever. So for me, I use film as a way to, you know, as my vehicle. So it was very therapeutic for me. I'm still in healing. I'm still in therapy. I'll probably be in the casket, be like calling up my therapist, like, hey, man, did they bury me good?
That's great. I imagine it's infectious for anybody watching this film if you are personally connected to the topic, like we are, obviously. And I can concur. I called an uncle trying to get some of my folks here, and he said, no, I got to go to your grandma's last sister's funeral. So it was a funeral I missed today. But I was able to tell this particular uncle, who will cry at the drop of a hat, especially if family gatherings and, you know, we wrapping up and he starts crying. So I told him, I said, well, I'm gonna miss you, but I just want you to know that you have been an example, the chief example for me growing up as my uncle, as a man who can balance his masculinity with his emotions, right? And my mom called me today about how he called her up and started crying about how touched he was and how that was the first time a man has said that to him, let alone a black man, let alone somebody in his family. So this film definitely has an ability to touch all of those around us. And you had
I just want to make a quick comment to what you just said, and say something that I've actually never said before. I've been in therapy for about 30 years. I'm 74 years old. Hey, man, I'm feeling good. Hey, and it's real. It's not all real, but it is. And I'm in therapy because of something that you said that I want to make sure everyone understands. Um, Therapy is really not about your problems, it's about your potential. Right. It's really about who you can be. I was in therapy for a couple of years. I thought I was doing fine. I started getting out, and the cat said, no, 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 no. He said, you just started to stop putting out the fires that you kept starting. Right? And so, in the same way that I get up at 6:30 in the morning and try to do this boot camp to keep control of this hypertension and diabetes, you know what I mean? I see my therapist every week. It's not about my problems. I'm fine. Been married 50 years. Things are going great, right? It's about the potential and success that you want in your life.
Thank you. So DB, I wanna ask you another question. You told us how, as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, you experienced shame for not being a man, right? And we experienced that shame for being 10 years old and not being a man, right? It's not like, why are you expecting me to do this? So what was your pivot like? And talk to us a little bit about when you started to discover your emotions and how valuable that was. Who did you share it with? Who was the first to witness that?
That's a loaded question right there. So I mean, there's too many ways. There's a lot of ways to answer that. But you know, when you say when was my pivot, you know, one of the things I think that we don't talk about a lot is the fear that we live in, and really like the fear of that you might see me, like for who I've been trying to hide behind for all these years. And that could be anything, whether your parents, you know, got divorced, whether you know, you got family secrets or whatever it is that you're trying to keep people away from. And so growing up in that neighborhood, I had to lead with fear. And you talk about the pivot, I guess the pivot came because I became so aggressive with it that I ended up almost taking somebody's life before. And I did that by chasing him down the street and trying to kill him over something super, super small. But in the moment, right, it's like I felt like I had no choice but to do it. But when I was in jail, sitting in jail behind it, all of a sudden I realized that that was very petty. And it's something that made me, you know, start thinking about, and it's something that I teach now, that, you know, putting things in perspective, I learned to live and understand that the higher the emotions are in any situation, the lower the logic tends to be. Some of y'all missed that, so I'm gonna run it back. The higher the emotions are in any situation or any conversation you're in, the lower your logic tends to be. So because we're leading with emotion and the emotion of fear, growing up in those neighborhood, the type of decisions that I was making was causing me continuous pain on top of the family secrets, right, that we all probably experience. So it's a very challenging and difficult thing. And for me, like most people who find themselves as thought leaders after going through a lot of things, I just turned, you know, my pain, right, into prosperity, right? I started to use myself as an example of how to manage, process, and understand my emotions and start leveraging it for a greater cause. And so that's how I ended up going back and, you know, working in the probation department, working with young people. That's how I became an emotional intelligence consultant. Like, I teach people about emotions because it helps me, right? Because I don't ever want to be that person that I used to be. Like, I already know if you say something slick to me, like, I'm giving you a pass for the both of us, right? Because more than likely, you're not really go as far as I'm willing to go. Like we don't talk about, like, you know, they was talking about suicide, but like a lot of the young black men be on kamikaze missions too, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I always tell people, like, you know, and I'll wrap it up. You know how packages come and it be like fragile, you know, handle with care? Well, why does those packages say that? it's saying it because even though it's bubble wrapped and packaged all up and padding, whatever's inside of that, if you mishandle it, right, you're probably gonna break it. And I feel like our emotions, every last one of us, our emotions are fragile. But I don't really mean fragile like a flower. I mean fragile like a bomb. And we gotta learn how to handle each other with care. And so there's something called the law of intentionality. So, and it suggests that your emotional growth or growth is not just gonna happen. You have to be intentional about it. So I'm very intentional about how I handle folks. I recognize that even when people don't recognize it, like I'm kind of thinking for both of us, because I know that emotions are fragile and not like a flower, but more like a bomb.
Thank you. Wow. Did y'all get that? Okay, so Frank, you have a backstory, right? And so you didn't just show up, right? You've had struggles and challenges, and at one point in your life, you were homeless. And so that being a part of your life, how have you showed emotion during these difficult life experiences coming out of that into this world that you're in now?
Well, you got some questions over here, Oprah. No, I'm just messing with you. Well, to put that into context, when I was a young person in the 80s, and if you guys are from Oakland, it was a very problematic time in our city in the 80s with drugs and, Felix and all kind of stuff was crack. My mother was on drugs. She, when I was about 14, she got addicted to crack. And at that particular point, I got into it with her about some money situation, and I moved out. I slept in my car for a few months. I was still in school. Thank God I never dropped out of school and able to go to, college in San Diego State, where we met Shonda, and then Columbia. And so I channeled my anger, I think, and now that I'm in therapy, he made me realize I just wanted to be seen, right? I wanted somebody to know that a little ghetto kid is somebody too, right? And so that's why, for me, being seen was important. And a lot of these young men that I've done stories about, whether it be Tupac, or whether it be Big, rest in peace to Big, or whoever, people that I knew, they just wanted to be seen. They wanted to tell the stories of their lives. They wanted to be somebody, right? Because a lot of times we're nobodies. These young black men that you saw in these things, nobody really pays attention to them unless they're famous or well-known, or they can dribble a basketball or, make a record. So I always come back to that. I remember one time this has got to be like around 86, 87, and we were living in a shelter, and I think I was around the Ville, right, 69th Village, and I had to get back to the Doves in the 20s, and I didn't have any money. I literally had no money, and the bus was like $1.50, something back then. And I told myself I'll never, ever, ever put myself in that situation again. So that memory, that homelessness, that sticks with me. When I'm hanging out with celebrities or doing whatever else, it's a trip. I've tried to talk to my mother about it, but she was not equipped to deal with it because her mother didn't help her work through it. So when Tanisha, when the thing was talking about the PTSD, I still have PTSD. I deal with it every day. Sometimes it's like, damn, I can't deal with the pressure of my job or my life or my kids or whatever. And, I'll have to tell you this last thing, and I think DB was kind of talking about it. Being black in Hollywood has gotten way better. Shout out to George Floyd. I mean, he's opened a lot of doors. Unfortunately, it sounds bad. But, I deal with a lot of different stereotypes and bullshit that you could only imagine in some ways. And so mental health and keeping yourself straight and being thoughtful about when I was homeless and having those memories as a data bank, it fuels me because I'm like, you motherfuckers have no idea what I did to get here. So, either, as DB said, you're going to get out the way or you're going to get these size 12s. So, that's just the East Oakland in me, you know what I mean? But, no, man, humble roots just make you want to go harder, you know what I mean? And one last thing about that film, it's a trip, and I hopefully you guys didn't miss it. Two of my favorite parts of that thing. The first one was Billy saying, this is the first time I got seen by black people, right? White people love him. He's the king, right? They love him. But black people, now we can't mess with Billy. Now whatever. And now we're like, oh, Billy, he's the man, right? Right. And then the second part was when the psychologists were talking about the slaves were messed up because they didn't want to be a slave. That just shows you how deeply ingrained in the history of this country that they don't want you to be mentally healthy because they want to keep you oppressed. They want to keep the police with a gun to your head and make you be in fear, right? So I just wanted to make that point because there's so many, there's so many things in that. One last thing. That film was filled with a lot of, I call it candy and vegetables, meaning I gave you some candy, inspiring brothers, doing their things, making great things, but I also gave you some vegetables, which is what you really needed to eat to make you feel good and digest. So, shout out to the candy and vegetables in there too.
Right on. Thank you. So we're going to actually take some audience questions. Do you guys have any questions? We're going to take them in a second. You got a comment? Or you'll be the first question. We got one more. I want to ask one more question for Dr. Woods. How relatable is DB and Frank's story and experience to what you see in your practice? And if you could go even a little further and talk about how does childhood trauma, how do we, because what I would say is we need to assume certain levels of trauma in everyone. And how do we come up from under the trauma?
So most of my career I've spent with people on death row. For the last 30, 35 years, I've worked with young men and women on death row across the country. And there's a question that I always ask, excuse me, when I first meet someone, Tukey, I don't know if you guys knew who Tukey was. And it sounds like a sociological question, but it's really a neurological question. And the question is there any difference between the young person, because typically they're 16, 17, 18 years old. I do primarily what we call habeas work, so I see them 10 years after they've been in, maybe 20 years after they've been in. And I say, is there any difference between the person that came in here 10 years ago and the person I'm sitting in front of today? And when they say no, I know that there's a neurological problem, right? Because they were children when they came in. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. They were children when they came in. They were on the streets fighting for their lives when they came in. And now they've grown up in a cage. And they have some understanding of what life could have been. And it's frightening. A mother, and this actually is a rare case because this is an innocence case, but a mother whose son was set up at 17 in Kansas City, Missouri, went and saw her son every week for 24 years. One day she was sitting there, she saw him every other week. One day she was sitting there and she saw this older man coming toward her, and she didn't think much of it. She's waiting for her son. He walks by, he stops at the table. She doesn't think much of it. She looks up and she realizes it's her son. She finally saw him at 41 and not at 17. He had been 17 to her for 20 years. So what do? We look at the fact that, as you said, we have all been traumatized in some ways. We've all been traumatized in ways that we don't really understand, and in many ways, we don't really even feel because it's so much a part of our lives. It's so much a part of how we hide, of how we laugh, of how we look at the things, that we don't really think about it. But we can all pivot. We can all pivot because, as my mother used to say, the weak ones died on the boat. right? We have a resiliency. The fact that we are here, the stories that we've been told here tonight are stories of resiliency, are stories of wellness. And I really think that, frankly, social media is going to make a significant difference in being able to get those stories and get that health to health, not illness, not pathology. Get that health to people that aren't going to be coming to me, aren't going to be seeing therapists, but are going to be picking up the emotional intelligence that they need to make a difference. I'm optimistic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll take some questions from the audience. Dr. Lenore?
Yeah, this is a tremendous presentation. I think we should give them a hand. This is a great. About 15 years ago, I interviewed a young black man, who felt that shame was the basis of all the pathology, most of the pathology we see among black men. I have not had another word about shame until this particular event. As I think back on my own experience with my own father and my own family, shame was the basis of everything that we did. And I wonder if whenever we talk about good health, we talk about three things. We talk about diet, exercise, and stress reduction. But really, isn't shame more important than stress for black men? And do most psychologists who deal with black men understand the impact that shame has on the pathology that they have?
So that was a graduate school question, but I'm gonna answer it.
Well, I have a faculty of graduate school people.
Thank you, Dr. Lenore, and it reminds me of a point that I wanted to make that I didn't make, which was the crying and the shame that comes with crying, right? Because as a man, what are you crying for? You crying because you were defeated, or because you lost, or because you were somehow less than, right? That's where the shame comes in. But then how do you know true pride? How do you know true confidence, right, if you don't have both sides? And so it's kind of a pathology, like you're saying. If our whole goal is to be invincible, then shame has no place in our conscious mind, right? And so, but then that's what handicaps us from, being accountable to our feelings and not blowing up over a little thing. So thanks for that.
I want to give you guys some of my spirit to share this with you guys. I want to give you guys a quick life hack. And you can go ahead and use it. This is one of my DB-isms. So when you use it, let them know that DB laced you with this. You might even want to pull out your notepad for this one. So you know how all of our cell phones and our computers, every now and then, it'll ask for a software update. Anybody ever had that software update? And it'll be like, you want to update it now, or you want to update it later? What do most people say? Right? And then you keep pushing later to eventually, right, you got to plug the phone in, let the thing do, right? And why does it want to update? It want to get the bugs out, right? It want to make your phone faster, make sure you get the latest features. So I'm going to introduce you to something that's unique and proprietary to my platform. There's something that we like to call your internal software. Your internal software is made up of three elements. It's a combination of your beliefs, your values, and your life experiences. And this is how you show up every single day: what you believe, what you value, and what you've been through. Now, here's the catch. A lot of your beliefs don't even belong to you. They was downloaded to you at a young age. Come on, follow me. Your values, some of your standards, you got from Big Mama. But that don't mean she was right. Right? Some of the things that your parents taught you don't mean it was right. So you continue to grow and you hold on to these beliefs, these values, and some of these life experiences, and they're outdated. A lot of us have not updated our internal software. So some of us, the reason why let's just put it this way, you guys. There are a lot of broken children riding around these adult bodies, which is why sometimes you look at somebody and be like, really? Because they're showing up, right, on some outdated information and things that's governing them. And to me, that's a life hack because most people have not just sat and thought about the things they believe, the values that they have, and how long they hold on to past life experiences. And if you take a moment to update your internal software, right, you will begin to free yourself. You will give yourself permission to be able to process the things that's happened to you. And if that's going over some of your head, let's just think about like what you were taught about being disrespected. Because I know a lot of us in here, if somebody disrespects you, what does that mean? Looks like she's shaking her head like, you gonna get it, right? And when I was younger, I had a long list of stuff that I would not be disrespected for. But then you get older and you learn like that list is like that small now, right? Outside of you trying to put your hands on me, you could probably get away with it because I don't give you that kind of power. But if you buck up against me and I determine something's being disrespectful, what is the next thing I'm gonna do? Based on what I believe about disrespect, where I come from, I don't have no choice but to cause harm to you. At least that's what my old belief is. My new belief says you can have that, right? But it wasn't until I updated that and processed that I could be the man that I am today. Doesn't mean I'm weak, soft, punk, none of that. Like I said earlier, I'm giving you a pass for both of us, right? Because it don't make no sense to go to the extreme. It doesn't make no sense to over argue with you or to not like you. Like if somebody hears somebody don't like them, what's the first thing you say? I don't like them either, right? But you really ain't like you really don't like them. You just don't like the fact that you think they don't like you. Right? When you use little, they say use your words. Like nobody want to use their words and find out what it's about. And I'll wrap it up by saying, within that, we have to be mindful of our emotional biases. And there's something called projection bias that I bet you everybody in this room do. And that all that means is that when somebody does something or says something that you don't think it should have been said that way, it should have been handled that way, the first thing you do is look at them crazy, be like, why you say that? Where they do that at, right? You are projecting out how you think something should be handled. But the reality of it is everybody is programmed differently. So every time you try to tell somebody what they shouldn't be doing, every time you talking mess about somebody, I mean, nobody in this room do that, but you know what I'm talking about. All you're doing is projecting onto others how you think things are. And the faster you get a hold on that, the first domain of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And you have to be mindful of your own mood, your own attitude, and the energy that you bring to any situation. So we like to encourage people to vibe responsibly.
Thank you, DB. Next question.
DB, thanks for that. So first, I don't know about a lot of you guys here, but I thought I was showing up today just to be a supportive partner. I had no idea I needed this, all right? But I need to give a little context. DB and P. Frank, I share your experience. I come from Cabrini Green Housing Projects in Chicago. And so with 3 generations of female-headed household, being a man thrusted in that position at 5, I was told you should not show emotion, right? I learned through therapy and other places that you should, and in preparation of being a dad of 2 boys, I thought that I had gotten it. I showed these boys how to emote. I chose to emote and did a huge victory lap that I got there, okay? And then I had 2 epiphanies. Number 1, I started to matriculate through corporate America, where a black man showing emotion was not something that was going to give me the pathway to success. So I had to then suppress that emotion. Number 2, in raising these 2 boys, one of which is riding around in Piedmont, after going through this George Floyd experience during the summer, I told him, when you encounter cops, don't emote. And now he's confused, all right? And so am I. So Doc, Macheo, help.
You know, I was listening. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you're Doc too.
I apologize. I was listening to you, and I was
Mike, we can't hear
Closer, just hold it closer.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was listening to you, and I was thinking about your wording, and you said, and maybe I'm wrong here. You said I had to suppress that emotion. Is that what you said?
That's what I was taught.
Right. You know, that's one of the things that we have to think about because we can't always manifest. There are some times when we have to suppress that emotion, but that's not the same as not having that emotion. And we have to think about what we do with it when those times come up. There's a scene in what's that movie about the bus that won an Academy Award? Not Chase. The Crash. It's Crash, and there's a movie. There's a scene in there. I don't know if any of you have seen it, where the white cop molests the sister in the, and her husband's right there, and then he has to then go from that point to talk to Tony Danza, who is the producer of the movie. Of the rap song, and Tony is trying to get the young rapper who is very well educated to somehow speak English in the vernacular so that it fits the song. And the brother's upset because, his wife has just gone through this. And Tony Danza says something to him, basically, if you don't get it, you're out of here. And the cat shapes up. We all have to, at times, shape up. It's the same thing we do with our sons when we give them the talk, right? But that doesn't mean that you put those emotions away. And we all have to understand where they go and what do we do with them. And we all have to have these pockets that we put them away to clean those Augean stables.
So thank you, Dr. Woods. I will add to that and just say that we got more than 5 emotions, right? It's not just anger. So, therapists, we had this chart. It's got like how many? 100 different faces with emotional descriptions. So it's not to not show emotion. It's don't be angry, don't be pissed off, don't be indignant, right? That's what we're trying to do. That's the whole respectability piece, right? But it's also about staying alive. And so what we have to do is develop a broader range of emotions. Okay, officer. No, I'm a little nervous, actually. I don't know why I was pulled over, but I'll comply with it, right? So being able to navigate one's own emotions should be the next level. Until we get to that point, right, DB, everybody, they had to, be in training for a while. But once you get to that point where you're accepting responsibility for your emotions and the actions that come from your emotions, then it's not about not showing emotion. That sparks fear in other folks that encounter us. And it multiplies when we're with our children and we're trying to be protective. And so that's the illogical reality of our response and what actually brings us out of a situation safely. Yes, please.
And there's something when it comes to emotional intelligence that we call situational awareness. And situational awareness is that you're always assessing, is this energy that I need to engage in or energy I give space to? And you learn to play chess, not checkers. If I'm engaging with this cop and he out of pocket, I understand that he just got a job. And right now, I don't have a better hand, so I'm going to let him have his moment. I'm not going to do nothing to give him, because he got authority. I worked in a position of authority for 16 years. If you challenge with somebody with authority, they're going to smash on you. That's just what they're going to do. Just like if you talk back to your parents, right? They're going to smack the, because they feel like they got the authority. So, you know, I would tell my boys, right, to exercise situational awareness and get in the habit of assessing not even just extreme conversations, but just everyday conversations. As you come in contact, because energy introduces you before you say anything. And if you start looking at the energy and picking up on the vibes of situations, then you'll know whether you should engage or get some space to. Doesn't mean that you won't get a chance to express yourself later. Like Dr. Macheo was saying, like, understand that we playing chess, not checkers. I'll make my next move my best move. I'm gonna let you have this, but we'll meet again, right? Because you're just a job, right? So I would encourage them to look at it that way, because when you can give us new perspective, then it gives us an opportunity to look at situations differently. If we're just looking at the way we've been always looking at it, then it's kind of hard to accept, and that's why he probably feels confused.
And I was going to add one more piece. Thank you, DB. We're just kind of vibing off each other. Is that when you do shut down and just deny that, you're going to turn around and take it out on spouse, kids, whoever else can be taken out on. Yes, next question.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Marie. I'm a PhD student at Auburn in counseling psychology. My emphasis is youth work and healing from race-based traumatic stress. And so what I heard today was a lot about healing, but also community healing. And so my question really is, how can we respond to youth in a way that isn't just about correction, but is about facilitating their healing? I think often we all go into flight, fight, freeze, and we go straight to correction, right? And so how can we really respond to aggressive behaviors or defiant behaviors in a way that cultivates their healing and helps them learn more how to navigate situations?
Accept and build rapport. And I want to hear some other answers. Excellent question. Thank you very much. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and all the wit, humor, attitude, everything, right? And I work with young people in high schools and my organization, staffs, people in the schools. And what we actually did was staff community folks in the high schools who are like DB and Frank, not like Dr. Woods and Dr. Payne. And they go in and I tell them, I said, your job is not to say, pull your mask up, do this, do that. Your job is to make as many positive connections as possible. Your job is to learn as many names as possible. And by doing that, if they're cutting class, if they're smoking a blunt, if they're doing this, if they're doing that, we're not gonna embrace or accept that, but we're gonna embrace and accept them by bringing them in, encouraging, hey, put that out there, we'll deal with that later. Man, walk with me while we go to your class, right? And so that is something, and I got my coworker, Jerome Gordine, who's the co-chair of the Black Reparations Committee for Oakland schools. But that's what I would say, is to accept those behaviors, because what DB said is, once you're in crisis, what are you doing? You're cutting class. It ain't about that at all. It's about, why is he yelling at me? And then also what he said was, your ability to understand logic is at its lowest. That would be the parent, right? So we can't get, ironically, emotionally upset at our children, because then we will make decisions at our least capacity, right? And so I want to stop and pass it to whoever else has thoughts.
I just want to say, I hope that you all understand that you are in the midst of black brilliance, right? I mean, I'm sitting between two brilliant. Have you been listening to the things that they are talking about, right? I mean, and let me just bring it up to this point. What DB just said as it relates to your question, he took post-traumatic stress disorder and told you what to do with it, right? I could talk to you about PTSD, right? But he told you what to do with PTSD. He said, be a critical thinker. Be aware. Use that situational awareness every day, because what happens in PTSD is it knocks out your awareness, right? You want to react. You want to be hyper-reactive. He said, no. Right? So we're sitting here in the midst, and I got these two towers, man, of black brilliance that are telling us how to take this academic that often we can't translate and make it work. That's, to me, amazing.
All right, how y'all doing tonight?
Well, one thing before Charles asks a question is that I think that a lot of times we talk at our children, we don't talk to them. And, you know, I try to meet people where they are. And, you know, one of the things as a parent, you got to think before you get it, like, well, what did I do when I was that age? What was my mentality like? And I think, you know, I have a 17-year-old twins and a 7-year-old, and social media, my daughter, my oldest, she's stressed out all the time about how she looks and this and that, and half her life she's in the thing, you know, my youngest daughter, or whatever. And so I just think that we got to try our best to continue, especially as young black men. You know, I deal with a lot of, obviously, me producing that show is stressful, right? Because I take all of that stress in, right? Because they just dumped all the whatever. And I think that when I talk to young people, especially young hip-hop kids, and, you know, they have a fatality mentality, meaning that they think that, you know, I definitely thought I was going to be dead, but the fact that I'm here is unbelievable. And so I think sometimes you got to really humanize these young kids and get out of the fact that you can't talk to them with compassion. And so I think that that's just really important, you know what I mean? And I think that that's, especially young black men and young black girls as well.
All right, y'all, my name is Chuck Johnson, and by a show of hands, who remembers Soul Beat? Okay, a lot of y'all know, okay, over 35, a few people over 35 remember Soul Beat, right? And be proud of that, be proud of that. We done made it this far. I'm 47, I'm glad to be here. So the reason why I even brought up the Soul Beat project is for two reasons. I'm doing a documentary on it. And the reason why we're doing a documentary is because, one, culture. All right, let's keep it real, all right? At one time, we were 60% dominant in this city, whether it was the businesses, City Hall, the homes. But some of y'all done sold grandma's house, but I digress. That's a whole nother conversation, right? Gentrification happened, but really we gentrified ourselves out. It got silent. Okay, we're gonna leave that one there. And then the second part was, it was basically like a multi-generational platform. It was where, you know, grandma could see some content. You know, I hosted a hip hop video show on there. And so you just had different ways that we can talk to the community. So the question I basically wanna ask y'all, because let's face it, man, I've been doing DB almost 30 years. And it's crazy how when we mentioned the Sobrani Park and the Brookfield dynamic, by just literally this line, which was like a railroad track. Tell them, DB, if me and DB wasn't cool and I'm from Sobrani and I come over here to Brookfield, oh, we fighting, right? Sure. So that's how tribal. Stay on my side. I'm over here in Sobrani. But the beautiful part was me and DB was one of those ones that, hey, I'm from Sobrani, but he from Brookfield, but DB cool. Like, I can't be mad at this dude. Like, we started breaking that barrier a long time ago. But the question I guess I want to ask is, let's face it, y'all, we was born and raised in a mixture of the Black Panthers and the Ward Brothers and the Mac, right? Some of us went all the way to the Black Panther side, some went kind of towards the Mac side, some of us kind of swirled it. I swirled it. I mean, I had to have some player in me, you know, to be in the town, you got to be a player, you know? Versus you had to be kind of like, all right, I don't like this system. This ain't cool. We need to change it. So the question I wanted to more or less ask is, we need a communications bridge to highlight these youngsters. Because me and Pete Frank was just having this conversation like, man, these youngsters is bipping, they doing this, they doing that. And what did I say to you, Pete Frank? I said, it's your fault. Why I say it's your fault or our fault? We don't talk to them no more, man. Them youngsters, man, I'm cool. So the question I'm asking y'all is, what is the communication bridge to turn the hood back to a neighborhood? Like, what is the way we get at the youngsters where we relatable with them, but we also trying to give them the right lessons in life?
Talking heavy. So I'm gonna say this, and this is just my own personal opinion. So I worked at Juvenile Hall for 16 years. Before that, I worked in the court system, so I'm very familiar with young people. And I know one of the things I noticed working in Juvenile Hall, They do whatever they do in the streets, and I worked for Youth Alive prior to that, so I was doing crisis intervention. And so whatever type of work we did with young people, like after you work with them for a short period of time, right, they start to, relax a little bit. They start to reveal their inner child and start to be the more respectful and more manageable, things of that nature. But then the problem is that they go back, right, to where they was getting all these old beliefs and values in the first place, and so it becomes this vicious cycle. And so we always be like, what we gonna do with the youth? What we gonna do with the parents? Right, what we gonna do with the uncles? What we gonna do with because that's really where it really is. And so that's one of the reasons why I started to work with adults and not just youngsters anymore, because I felt like I kept sending the youngsters to adults that needed to be, you know what I mean? So that's my response, like, until we start coming back together as a community. But again, we don't even, when we look at each other, especially as men, I don't know how the sisters do it, but we size each other up before we even speak. I'm looking at so if you look unfamiliar, my guards is up. When we see each other, we're supposed to be leading with love, right? But we don't do that, and where does that come from? So we are already just separating ourselves. We are in a lot of different silos, so it's going to be very hard to get to the root of the problem. We got a lot of people putting in a lot of good work. But when you throw out that question like, what do we do? It's like, it's a loaded question because it ain't just them. You know what I'm saying? Like, them guns got to be somewhere, right? Everybody in here know, I got family that's off the hook. You know what I'm saying? And I can't really get a handle on them because they out, So it's like, it's deeper than just what we're going to do with them, because the people who gave birth to them, the people who got them to where they at, they don't even hardly respect them. So it's like, it's a lot of work that need to be done. And I think people are starting by doing it in their own way, but until we come together more unified, I think we're going to always kind of keep spinning our wheels. That's just my perspective.
Well, Chuck and I were just talking about, I was mentioning to him, I'm doing this show, and it's about high-profile hip-hop crimes. And so I was talking about these young kids and why these young guys killed each other, certain really well-known rappers. And when I was researching why it happened, it was the most stupidest kids in here and you could think of. They got mad at each other on social media. They're on Instagram Live. Next thing you know, 2 weeks later, they saw the other guy, they argued and they shot each other. It was unbelievably stupid. It wasn't as if Russia and Ukraine are like some money or billions of, you know what I mean? It was just unbelievable. And I was thinking to myself, and I was telling Chuck, I'm like, how do I reach them? What do I do to talk to these kids who are toting guns and videos, who have a fatalistic idea? They almost it's like Pac. If you talk enough about death, it's probably going to happen to you, right? At some point. And so I try my best to like talk to them as much as I can, but it's very stressful. I will say, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. I think in some ways it's gotten worse. The social media and the way young black men are. I think I had a chance to see Huey, and I had a chance to see Felix, right? And so I was able to see somebody who was trying to do something positive, you know, and we don't put that many images out, so I was blessed to be able to do a film like that. But I think we got to, you know, you got all these mothers raising these boys, and, you know, you got to be like, well, where are the fathers in these situations? Even if one of the other episodes you have to watch is about black men loving black women, and then, you know, are black men good fathers? Because even if you're not married to the woman, you can still parent that child. And I think a lot of these kids are getting parented by mothers who may not have the same thing they can talk to their sons. And also, they don't have a figure to come tell them, why are you putting a gun in a rap video? What are you doing? Why are you disrespecting? Why do you have your pants like? They need elders like us to be able to talk to them. And sometimes I tell you, they don't want to listen. I deal with a lot of these young kids, they don't want to listen. Try my best to do what I can, but it's a fight, brother, and I think we can't give up on our kids. So that's the number one thing, you know.
We have a lot of
Real quick, 2 minutes. And I was telling, I was like, this is gonna be a good question. We didn't get it out. And so you remember, we was at YU, and what we do is we treat them like kids, right? And what I mean by that is once you get folks in a room and then you create the circumstance for them to just be 14, 15, 16, 17, laugh, play, right? oh, they just sink into that. And so I walk around, I see 5 or 6 brothers all dressed the same hair, same everything, looking this big. They're 9th and 10th graders. How y'all doing? Chilling. Y'all hungry. Kids is hungry. They thirsty. You can offer them a drink. You treat them like a kid. You treat them like a kid, and they'll respond like a kid. You treat them, what's up, dog? What's up, boss? You know how many times people call me dog, boss, from when I was a little kid, and it didn't feel right, right? So if we look at them as children, right, and the systems and structures that were put in place that made them adultified during slavery, those were never altered. Those were never changed. And in the societal perception, we still see men and their boys, their children. And I only have 2 sons, and when he was 11 or 12, and Dad, can you open my juice? I'd be, man, shh. And the way I fixed myself and just opened his daggone juice was I said, if this was a girl, if I had a daughter, and she was like, Daddy, will you open my juice? I'd open it without a second thought. But because he's a male, I'm like, you better open your juice, right? So I let that go. All right, go ahead.
Hilarious.
Hey everybody, my name is Jasmine. I work in the social work field, very heavy in mental health. This is a very important conversation for me. I work with children and families, and I think that it goes without saying that I am trying very intentionally to raise my black boy as a human and acknowledge his feelings and all of that. But there are also 2 other men, black men in this room, who I want to support. I have a black father. He's on the stage. And my black husband is sitting next to me. And I know these 2 men very well, and I've seen them be vulnerable, and I've also seen them reject comfort. And so my question to you is, how do I support you?
Wow, that's a powerful one, DB. She got you over there. I think they related to you, maybe.
She's trying to see if black men cry.
Is he the black man cry? Why you doing like that? She took a personal jab.
Yeah, no, Jazz. Like, I think by showing up today, I think by you just modeling, the things that I've tried to download to you coming up, is very supportive within itself. But then, like I've always told you, just check on me. You know what I'm saying? I always say like that line from the Denzel Washington movie, who cries for a little boy that cries inside of me. So just to check in every now and then and just see how I'm really doing is all the support I need. Hey, you a social worker, work your magic.
I'll share something, and I think we were talking earlier, I was talking to Monique and Mignon. There's a gentleman named Shakir Stewart. I don't know if you guys know Shakir. And then there was another guy named Chris Lighty, who was a well-respected music executive. And I produced a show about both of these gentlemen. And unfortunately, both of these young men took their lives. It's a very, very heavy situation. But one of the things I remember when I was producing Chris's show, and I'm just in relation to your question, Chris Lighty was a manager for 50 Cent, P. Diddy, Mariah Carey, like extremely well known. He did 50 Cent's Vitamin Water. But Chris was having some mental health issues and wasn't, like Kanye, wasn't taking his meds. You see where that happened. And what happened was, when I was researching it, I ended up getting Chris's medical records from his wife, who he had some stress with. They were physically abusing each other. And one of the things that Chris said in there, which is really dealing with what you said, in his own words, he said, I've been protecting everybody else. Who's looking out for me? He had been taking care of his mother, his brothers. He'd been the man his whole life. He'd been taking care of everybody, right? He's been DB. He's making sure you're good, making sure your emotional situation is there. But when it was time for his situation, he felt alone. And his mother, while he was going with this, was trying to get some new tires, right? She wasn't saying, damn, I might need to just stop and take care of this son who's been my husband and a father to my kids. And so I'm saying that, when you're thinking about the black man in your life, maybe instead of you arguing or lecturing at him or doing whatever that moment is, you might take a moment to just think and put yourself in his shoes and try to think about his mental health. You know what I mean? And I think it's just like proximity. People usually kill the people closest to them. It's better if you love the person closest to you right? Because they need that the most. So this project is about uplifting black men, trying to do that. And the only person, not the only person, but the main person that can help black men is, take a guess, is the black women in their lives, whether it be their daughter. So my daughter texted me right now. I'm sending her pictures. She's like, oh, that's a deep question. So, you know what I mean? You know, and I think that be my peace. Just be my peace and support me and love me. And if you got to chastise me or say something or do it in a loving way, you know. And I think that's really important. That your question is humongous, because you're this rib right here. As Earl always say when he talks about his wife 40, he says that's his rib, right? He calls her his rib.
Excuse me. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have a question, brother, but I do know this. I spent 41 years in prison. I don't have to tell you why. You can figure it out. And if you want to know the answers to the questions that you've been asking and what they're doing, go into prisons. You'll see how your children are treated, and you'll get the answers how to correct them. Believe me, I know.
So a quick question, what would you do to recommend for people if they want to find help? Because like Taraji said, like for her, she had that celebrity status and she was able to find people because she had that money. But for people who don't have that level of money or that level of prestige, what would you do or what would you recommend for them to find that help that they need to speak to somebody?
I'll tell you, I am finding incredible help in social media. I'm seeing groups that, as we saw here on, one of the things that you want to separate out, and it becomes very important to separate out, is the difference between serious mental illness and the day-to-day traumas that black folks go through. And I'm not saying that they aren't serious, but I'm just saying we're here tonight, right? Many of us are working. Many of us are taking care of our families. That doesn't mean that things aren't going on, right? That doesn't mean that there's not trauma in our lives, but we are resilient, right? We are resilient. We're able to make it through to the next day. And it may not be that you need a psychiatrist. It may not be that you need a trained therapist in that sense. But I think to have a collection of people that support you and care about you, and what I'm seeing on TikTok, which I'm on all the time, or Instagram, which I'm on all the time. I'm 74, right? And I'm on it all the time because I see revolutionary things that are happening in social media, and things that are really underground that don't get on CNN, that don't get in the New York Times, but that are changing people's lives. I have a daughter that I'm not going to give her age, but she's a marriage and family therapist, and she keeps me with my ear to the ground because it's not all about sitting in someone for 50 minutes, but it is about having that collective support. And that's where I would start.
I mean, you're here at the African American Wellness Project. You came to Ground Central to get some help. Lincoln Families, like you in the room with, as we say in the streets, you with the connect right now. So, you got the plug. So you just got to plug it in yourself. And I have to say to him, I just turned 50 years old. I've never seen so much conversation about mental health. The fact that I'm even producing a show about black men and mental health shows you the progress. I would have never been able to got this on television 5 years ago. And so I say utilize the resources, go online here, social media. There's so many black wellness projects across the country. It's almost exploded in the last few years. So, go look for it.
And
there we go.
collection of some of my dopest DB-isms. But most importantly, I interviewed about 20 to 25 people in our community, ranges, you know, from as young as my daughter to the elders from different professions. The black voice is inside of here, and probably everything that you or whoever you were speaking on behalf is inside of this book, brother. So here's my help from me to you.
That's beautiful. That wasn't my copy, right? That was. Right on, right on. So, in addition, right, traditional therapy through your health care and all of that is more of like a, because really the hospitals and the healthcare, unless you're like trying to kill yourself, which we ain't gonna admit, right? It's not a lot of help for you. So really look at it more, less as an intervention, but more as a lifestyle that you're beginning to incorporate of wellness and health and things like that, and then you will find answers everywhere.
Well, my name is Michelle Phillips. I just moved here about 2 months ago from Baltimore, Maryland, and this was very loaded for me. I want to speak to the gentleman right here. I became a correctional officer when I was 19 years old, and when I tell you I saw black men at the worst of their worst, but while I was going through the process to become a correctional officer, I had to talk to my father. My father was a single father who raised 2 daughters. And a reason I say that is because what you gentlemen felt as young black boys, I felt as a young black girl. My dad took me and was like, "Oh, you want to fight my daughter? Come on." So that balance, that nurturing that you get from your mother, I didn't get. So that toughness, that hardness, that fight, you know, every day, even when I was going through the process being a correctional officer, my dad was like, "You start, you finish. You don't stop." That fight is still very much in me. I am my father's daughter, right? But listening to y'all, I'm consciously unpacking what he instilled in me. And don't get me wrong, my dad is an amazing man. Love that. I wouldn't be who I am, a strong black woman, without him. But I don't think he understood the unforeseen consequences of raising me the way that he did, for me to be emotionally detached from individuals and then have the nerve to tell me, "Don't let your pride get in the way of your progress." So I say all that to say is I'm watching you all unpack this for me. So I thank you in that, right, as I'm trying to sift through this success that I don't think I would have had without him, but maneuvering it in a thoughtful and emotionally intelligent way. So I thank y'all for having the courage to do what you're doing and to educate us. And don't forget about these young black girls who were raised by amazing black men. Thank you.
I just want to say quickly, I want to thank you for that. I've been sitting here today thinking about, you know, we talk about the violence that's in the streets, but we don't talk about the complex violence that's often in the home, right? And that's the violence that is kicking your ass and loving you at the same time, right? And that's a tough one to deal with, right? I mean, that's a tough one to deal with when you get knocked around and kissed the next moment, right? You don't know what to do with that. And so you grow up and you become successful, and yet so much of that success is based upon what you saw and wanted to make sure that they appreciated you, not what you wanted to do. And you end up having to learn about yourself, and it is unpacking.
Didn't know if anyone was going next. My name is Benine. I work in tech, and I recently relocated here out from New York. I just want to thank you all for this conversation as well. You all kind of touched on this earlier, but my question is more pertaining to to your point around one of my beliefs, which I think love is one of the strongest forces in the world, right? And one of the things, like, I think what I've been hearing is like the traumas that we've all experienced, and even within your film, people coming from different parts or economic backgrounds and levels in life. And I think regardless of the life experiences you've had, this topic I'm bringing up around dating and relationships, how are you all teaching the young men to be more emotionally available? Because I feel like I grew up throughout an age where I saw technology grow. Like, I didn't have a phone growing up. I remember the flip phone invented and like, Blackberries, all these things, working in tech, and now work in the metaverse, which is the next revolution of, our digital society. And so aside from all of that, and like you said, it really starts in the home until you make a choice and decision that you no longer want to make whatever value or belief, you were downloaded with to unlearn or learn something new that you want to move forward and teach your family or children or whoever you influence in life. So really kind of want to understand, how do you teach men, and what do we need to receive as Black women to understand, how we can support you all to be more emotionally available when it comes to non-platonic relationships?
Oh, well.
So, well, first, right, we learned the anger response from modeling, right? From, oh, that's what they're doing. So same thing, right? Expressing emotion in front of your children, expressing your emotion in front of a group of men, right? Expressing your emotions to other men in your life, right? So the way I'm answering it is not necessarily what Black women can do or women can do, but when you see that in men, right, when you see the ability to express emotion, right, that's what's signaling to the boys, I can do that. I can do that too, right? And so I'll stop there.
So for me, I have to be honest about, my experiences. So I got mama issues, right? So, my mother left when I was like 8 years old. And, most of the time, the father leaves the house. So for me, it was my mother. And to this day, my wife has to be very patient with me on being able to allow her to love me, right? Because I know, and we've talked about this, I always, for myself, I'm always like on edge feeling like one day she gonna leave me, right? Like my mother did. I feel like it's, at some point, but we talk about this, and she be like, boy, I just said put the dishes in the dishwasher. Know about you, right? Like, everything is like sometimes to the extreme for me. Like, she's like, what are you talking about, right? And so we have to, and I'm thankful that she's patient with me like that. And so I would say for me, one, I have to own my own stuff before I could teach my son, right? And so I try to teach him to be a gentleman at heart, and to just care, you know what I mean? And then allow, like, because you have trust issues, because you don't want to open up because you think somebody's going to abandon you. And so my son doesn't experience that, but I think when you ask the question is, how do I teach, or what would I do, or any male who's trying to teach their children, you have to be honest about like the stuff that you have, or other than that, you just transferring it to them. Now, of course, it's not always bad, right? But there's a lot of that's in there that they talked about generational trauma, right? Like, so unconsciously, you download, that's why we was talking about, like, they say in parenting, like, either you are an emotional coach, right, or an emotional dismisser, right? And so I think that, we have to just be mindful of what we are sharing and making sure that we've done the work on that shadow work, right? That work that we need to do on ourselves before we start trying to teach our youth how to be. And so I would respond from that lens for whoever's listening or thinking about it and trying to figure it out. Cube say, check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? I think I say this a lot. I say that every day, like, everybody at some point find themselves in the mirror, but very few people make eye contact. Yeah, you make sure you look good on the outside, but very few people stop and just kind of look to see who is showing up every single day. And I think the more that we work within, right, then we'll show up better, right, on the outside. So.
Another side to this, and I don't often bring this up, particularly when in the Wellness Project, because I do think that one of the things that this project does that is so important is it doesn't deal with institutions. It makes you deal with yourself, right? And we know that there are racist institutions out there that we could continually victimize ourselves around. Having said that, the pressures on men and women to actually treat themselves with respect are so great today. When you listen to much of the music that my granddaughters and my sons listen to, that I listen to, that I like the beat. You know, and then hey, you know, right. But I think about the music even as you go back. When I go back into James Brown singing, "This is a man's world," right? Or when I listen to the OJs talk about family reunion, and the woman is the right arm, right? And I think about the disrespect that women have had to endure for ever, right? To be able to overcome that and to make sure that, you know, our black sons respect the women in their life, starting with their mothers. Respect them and appreciate them and recognize their brilliance and the role that they're playing. It's so very important. And you have to continually point that out, because there's shit coming at them all the time saying that's not true. So I just think that's important.
So we're being live streamed right now, and I have some questions on the live stream I want to read. One is, what particular issues should parents of gay boys focus on to support the emotional well-being of their sons? So.
One, right, we know initially we're treating all boys as humans, right? And then the masculinity piece comes in with sexuality, and it's really something that complicates the situation, but we saw it in the film. We're dealing with the same people that have a different behavior in their life, but they're the same person. They still have an emotional life. And so that would be the first step, is to kind of put them in a space where you're recognizing their masculinity and their maleness, so that that could be integrated as a part of who they are as a gay man.
Okay. And then we'll take one more, and we have a lot of audience questions still. The next one is, what local government resources are in Alameda County, or Alameda County resources are available for our demographic?
Resources, money?
They just said resources. Services, I guess.
Services. So, you know, we're in a region where there's a lot of focus, right? There's the city of Oakland, the school district, probation, Alameda County, but that's a totally boring conversation. But I would say Google works. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me a question, and I Googled it and then gave them the answer. And so resources is a broad question, so I'd need more information if I was going to get more specific.
I'm assuming it was for mental health for our demographic, for resources, yeah. Okay, access. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, I lost my questions. I think we have 3 questions. Malika, I think you're next. Malika, did you have a question?
I think what you're doing is fabulous. My name is Malika Bobineau, and I can totally relate to a lot of what was in the film. I was raised by a very strong black father and mother, and I have 3 brothers ahead of me. And so growing up in the early 70s, there were three things that I heard constantly that stayed with me was, at the time, don't bring home D's and F's, don't get arrested, and don't get involved with a white woman. We don't want cops coming to our door, you know? And so you hear that as a child, and it stays with you. So as I grew older, these were things that I looked out for as well and somewhat preached or repeated, not realizing it wasn't for me. But what I wanted to bring to you for discussion, or just what your thoughts are, is when you're raised very strongly as a black woman, I realize now with my brothers, they have emails about me that I'm not included. And one would always say, well, you need to watch how you talk to us. Well, I don't speak any differently than I did before. But my dad was very big on don't cry, don't show emotion. The first time I saw him cry was the day before he passed, because I said, don't pass on my birthday, and he waited a day after. And so now I've gotten in a few arguments with my siblings, and they'll run to my mom, and it was how she said it. But when did you become so sensitive? You know, when we were all raised a certain way, but then when I look at relationships, it's, well, you sound like an angry black woman. And it's like, well, I'm trying to talk to you, you know? But the in-your-face part that may shut you down, what's the best way, even through therapy, and as an adult, because we all change with time, that is more acceptable to finding peace in a relationship with a man?
You know what?
Kevin,
You the one been married 50 years.
I made it 50 years with my wife.
You know, Malek, I mean, I just think that, my first thoughts is that we all have to be responsible for how we vibe and how we communicate. And if someone's bringing something to your attention that you communicate with on a regular basis, that they are having trouble receiving it, I think that we just have to take under consideration that there might be some truth to it. Like, a lot of times we be like, you just taking it wrong or whatever, but like when somebody brings something to our attention and you hear it kind of over and over again, like, I'm not saying you got to change, that's the first thing you tell yourself, right? Always been like this, but I think that when you kind of navigate through life, what I like to call just an open-minded approach, and what I mean by open-minded means that you stop trying to look for right and wrong or good and bad in things, but you look for understanding, because we always raised that if something is bad, you punish it, right? If something is wrong, right, you shame it or you discipline it. So unconsciously, as adults, if you're talking to someone, or if you're engaging, if somewhere in your mind think that they wrong, they out of pocket, you don't like it, then you shift to that side where you engage from that side from a negative standpoint. And I think that if we could just try to understand where each other is coming from and not try to like knock it down or say it's not valid, I think then you can find a new space to come from. And you just got to make adjustment. I don't think there's no cookie cutter answer, but it's definitely worth taking into consideration.
And I would add, like, how many of you in the room have ever felt on a regular basis like that somebody didn't really understand you by how they responded or reacted, right? So that probably happens with us, right? How we're perceiving people's actions. So to DB's bias confirmation, or what do we call it? Projection bias. DB's projection bias, where somebody does something and you know exactly what they did and why they did it, and it annoys you because they trying to get at you, blah, 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 and right? So a way to get out of that is you just come up with 3 reasons for anything you think somebody's doing. Why 1, why 2, why 3? Why did he say that? Well, because I guess he's offended by me. Or I guess because, and if you can come up with multiple reasons, then you make your own personal certainty less important. That's the important piece with trying to understand people, is trying to understand that ain't nobody gonna really fully understand you. And so when you take that into account, trying to understand other folks, you allow some leeway and try to get the understanding at least that could be agreed upon. And then go from there, because if you don't believe the person you're talking to, then you're not gonna understand them. And sometimes we don't realize that we're expressing disbelief by asking questions multiple times, do this, repeating ourselves, repeating what they're saying. It's communicating disbelief. I don't believe what you're feeling. I don't believe what you're saying. I don't believe, right? I don't believe, right? And so we have to dig a little bit deeper when we are, faced with feedback, right? So it's just something that helps us disconnect from, and when we're talking about siblings and family, all bets are off, right? But at least in a working situation when you're with other folks, you can give people that grace.
All right, next question.
Let me take it a little bit, maybe a little bit differently. And the reason why I say this is because everything I learned about psychiatry, I learned in sales school. I used to be a salesman, and I was a salesman before I went to medical school. Medical school didn't teach me a damn thing about how to get along with people, right? But being a salesman taught me how to get along with people. It taught me how to talk with people when they didn't want to buy what I had to sell. It taught me how to treat people when they tried to lowball me and I was trying to make some money. So everything I really learned about being a psychiatrist, I actually learned at IBM in sales school. And that's particularly true with my sister, right? I try to be a salesman with my sister because it's my family. I have to get along with her. There's nothing psychological about it, right? It's family, and you love them, and you want to get along with them. That doesn't mean that you have to give in to everything, but you may want to figure out, how can I make this sale? What do we need to do to make this sale so that we can just get along and show that love when it comes?
Thank you. First of all, it is hella cold in here. When did black people start enjoying this cold? I don't know. I too grew up in deep East Oakland. I graduated from Castlemont High School. I lived on 96 and Birch Street, 100 and C Street, Funktown, 11th Ave, and Foothill. I know, Felix Mitchell, Mickey Moe. So, and Dr. Payne was one of my professors. I'm now a licensed therapist. I provide psychotherapy for young individuals that look like me.
Y'all clap it up for that.
I'm part of the 100 Black Men. In fact, I am the chair of the Mental Health Committee. The 100 Black Men, if there's anybody, there's somebody here from the 100. There's a couple more. Aren't you from the 100? There's a couple brothers in here. The 100 Black Men, our philosophy is what they see is what they'll be. We have 4 pillars. Economic help me out, wait. Health and wellness, economic development, I got it. Education, and the reason why I joined the 100 is mentoring. The biggest resource that we have is mentoring. Every Saturday, we actually provide mentoring to black boys in Oakland. We pay to mentor. That's all I got, actually. Turn that heater on.
All right, we have another question.
I'm actually cold myself, brother, so I feel you on that. My name is Armand. I am the former host of the Quiet Storm on KBLX. But, and I say that not to throw out credentials, sort of, but it's because I use music as my therapy. There was times I would call my lady and I'd say, I'm in here crying because I used the music as my therapy because I was going through things. I was going through a divorce. And I had to have a real conversation with myself because that was the only time I had time to myself because we don't have enough me time as men. Men, take your me time. Because if you don't have your me time, just like DB said, your emotional intelligence will be tested. So I've learned to not only talk to myself, because I talk to myself a lot now, I also talk to my lady. And I make sure she understands what I'm going through so she doesn't misunderstand what I'm going through. Because communication is the key, and that's what holds a lot of black men back, is there's a myth that we don't know how to communicate. That's not true. So tomorrow, we're going to talk about something that one of the young ladies brought up. There's a myth that black men don't value black women. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow because, sisters, do you feel that we support you? Be honest, do you feel that we support you? When you see us with someone that is not of our race, do you see? So we need to talk about this. So we're going to talk about that. It is part of the series, Profiled, and it is a myth. Because black men, we do support black women, but there's a lot of black women who's lost faith in us. And we want to change that narrative. But we have to talk about it. We want to hear from you. Because if we don't hear from each other, because you said competition, there are black men and black women that look each other up and down as competition. There's a new woman called the independent woman that doesn't need a man. So we have to talk about it. See, y'all giggling and laughing, but we're going to have this real conversation tomorrow. So it's going to be at M2, okay? It's going to be at M2 tomorrow. It's going to be from 6 to 9. We're going to watch the episode Profiled. Black men don't value black women. We're going to watch it, and we want to have the same feedback. But we want to have a good conversation, a good, healthy conversation, not confrontation.
They're not going to be serving drinks, I hope.
And it's going to be hosted by the lady. So she's going to stand up because she's giving me direction. Yes, no, she's going to stand up. No. So we have a podcast. It's called The Lady and the Voice, and we also have a radio show. And yes, we are in a relationship, and it wasn't based on trauma bonding.
No, but I have to tell you this. I do have to give him the details because he'll forget the details. The location, the time, RSVP, I have to do that. You guys, ladies, you know, you understand, right? That's all. Secretary. Thank you, secretary.
What is the first three letters of manage? Man. M-A-N. Thank you. So, brothers, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Number one, thank you guys so much for this conversation. I'm Kevin Nichols. I'm a community organizer here. And I would just, I'm not from Oakland, from the east side, El Cerrito, but there's some things that are very similar. But a couple of things that I wanted to point out, a couple of points that were made earlier that resonated with me. One of the reasons why I hate going to conferences and things and panels is because a lot of the people that have all the knowledge and all the great ideas are on the panel and on the stage, but then when the event is over, they all go their separate ways and do their own thing. So I'm wondering here, I know Chuck, I see Sean Granberry, some other people that are here, other organizers, like perhaps after this event is over, what can we do about some of the things of the outcomes of what you guys discussed. We said that, generationally there's, challenges of reaching certain, demographics of youth. People don't really like or share. Like, I'm going to post about this event when we leave here, and I'll get about 3 or 4 likes. People just are not engaged to health and wellness, mental health, et cetera. What are we going to be able to do going forward from here as a community to go back and reach back and get those young people that we were talking about, get some of those parents that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, et cetera, and take at least this block to block back as we leave here? What can we do to agree to commit to that is what I'm asking.
Kevin, I would suggest.
I'll keep the mic. Go ahead.
I would suggest, and perhaps I'm wrong about this, but I would suggest to you that one of the real issues that I see in Oakland and across the country is that there are lots of people doing great work, but nobody gives them any credit. I mean, there are so many organizations in Oakland. I'm consistently blown away by the number of organizations, the 40 and 40, ARC, just numbers and numbers of organizations that are doing great work within the blocks, but nobody connects them. You don't see them on Channel 2. You don't see them get the credit that they deserve, and it makes me wonder, how can we actually raise them up? Because, I mean, I could give you 20 groups in Oakland that are doing tremendous work, and nobody really knows anything about them. So I don't know how that happens. I don't know how they get connected.
Well, I have an interesting vantage point where I see a lot of organizing. I see a lot of organizations working together. I see a lot of committees. I'm on more Zooms in the evening unpaid than for my regular job, right? So I think it's happening, Kevin, and I think that if we really think back to 20 years ago, right, this was non-existent as a movement. So your question really speaks to how focused we are on this moment, which is important. But recognizing and understanding, taking a step back and saying, damn, we have come a bit of a way to get to where we are now, right? And so sometimes it's about just accepting that and saying, okay, here we are. We ain't solved the relationship thing yet. We just scratched the surface. We're going into other topics, but the commitment to continue, like, I'm gonna get one of them jackets, so he gonna be hearing from me, but I mean, just connecting with these brothers now, already being connected to a lot of the folks in this room, I appreciate your question, because I think it just puts us on notice that we can hang out. So whose house? I don't know. Who's, somebody got something around here? Okay.
So we have a couple more audience questions, but in the meantime, as we have the couple more questions left, I'm going to be coming around, a couple of us, and asking you to scan the QR code so you could do an evaluation for tonight. So that's what's going to happen now, but I have a couple more questions, and then I want to be cognizant of time.
Indeed. My name is Rob. I have a question about therapy and how it might be incorporated into our daily practice. Certainly, my family tradition was, we get your loins girded and you handle your business, right? And so therapy was something that you might consider if there were a problem that you couldn't otherwise handle. It was an intervention. You all have all spoken of how you've incorporated into your daily or weekly or persistent practice. I guess the question is, how might that be done without a professional, whether it be family, friends, church, what other social mechanisms it might be, or does that not count? Thank you.
I didn't hear that last week. How might that be done without?
So there's therapy that's done with professionals such as yourselves. I have always considered that something that one does as an intervention when there is an issue that is beyond your capability to handle, emotionally, psychologically, whatever the case might be. You all have all spoken of therapy being a regular part of your existence. Yes?
Right.
And the question is whether or not there are mechanisms that are effective at keeping you mentally centered without going to a professional necessarily.
Sure. I mean, when I think of therapy, I think of it as exercise. Right? To me, it's really no different than exercise. I exercise. I try to exercise, and you don't have to go to a gym to exercise. I live downtown Oakland. We walk the lake. We go up and down the hills. You don't have to be in a gym to exercise, but you have to do it. And that's the real question: is you have to think of it as wellness. You have to think of it as working towards your potential. You have to read a book like this. I consider emotional intelligence, the way he is describing it, as therapy. It doesn't mean that you have to be in a therapeutic relationship in order to do it, but you have to do it. And that's one of the things that, I think is so important in terms of us moving ahead. I don't mean to embarrass Dr. Lenore, but, I consider Dr. Lenore to be a revolutionary, right? And the reason why I think he's a revolutionary is because he does the shit, right? He really does it. So you can certainly do therapy in multiple ways, and there are multiple alternatives. It's just that you have to do it. You have to do it every day or however.
I was going to say really quickly, morning meditation. I do a lot of morning meditation where I take 2 minutes, 5 minutes just out of my day and just quiet and try to get myself. I have a lot of good friends, some of my frat brothers in here, people that I talk to who we have our man moments. I have a couple of homeboys they may meet every couple of weeks. They just kick it and whatever and just talk about it away from the women, away from trying to do whatever. I think you should find your fraternity, find your group around you. And I want to say one last thing is that the notion that you do therapy as an intervention is extremely wrong. And I don't mean to say that to you. I think therapy is a way of you hearing your own thoughts out loud with somebody who's not your sister, your brother, your cousin, or whatever. And so it's not about your daddy died, or your uncle died, or your wife left you for therapy. Therapy is there for you to help process your thoughts and for you to have a third party who's not related to you to help you do that. Everybody that you saw in that film, they got on the other side of it. And you heard Billy talk about that. You heard Trell talking about once they were able to kind of work their issues. And it's a constant healing. You're never healed, by the way. Let's make that clear. You don't get healed. Therapy is not there to heal you. It's there to just help you be better, right? And that's all it is. And so I just want to make sure, because I think if you say that, that's really scary to me, because the point of that whole thing was to make you realize that therapy is something good for you. That's not just for you when a bad thing happens. So, therapy is there for a good situation for you, brother. And I'd say mix it. Go with a therapist. Maybe you do it a few times a month. Maybe you go have some relatives or some homies that you get with and do the both. You know what I mean? And maybe you find a place in your place. I have a place in my office that I have like a little altar. I have like little pieces of stuff that I love. And I'll go do prayers there and talk to people or talk to my grandmother sometimes or just talk about things or think about it. You know what I mean? So therapy, you can make your own therapy session in your own world.
And then as an additional resource for myself, if you're asking me directly, so my company is called I Never Worry Consulting. And so my website is ineverworry.com. And on there, I do have a program called 30 Days to Emotional Wellness. So there's a coaching program on there where you get a coaching video every day, 5 minutes or less, that gives you individual EI strategies to focus on for the day that moves you from one space to the next in a 30-day period, and then there's a book that go along with it. So while you're figuring out other resources, I mean, that is something that, like, you can hop on right now and start, in a process of something that's not outside of a therapist, because our emotional wellness is very, very important. And so I broke it down to very, very bite-sized bits of information that we can take on a day-to-day basis to move into that space of emotional wellness.
We have a comment here, and then I think we have a couple more questions, and we're going to close out in about 5 minutes. That will take us right till 9 o'clock.
Hi, my name is Hannah. This is just like a life source to add on on to what Pops was saying. You could just take advantage of the 5 matters before the coming of 5 things. Your health before you fall sick, your wealth before you become poor, your free time before you become busy, your youth before you become old, and your life before your death. And no emotion is wrong. So.
I just want to follow that up. Thank you. Okay. I just want to follow it up because we think getting well is big, and it's not big. It's really these little things that we do every day, or try to do, or think about doing. When he talked about the 5 minutes per day, those are the things that make a difference in one's life. Those are things that make you whole, not well, but whole. So often, because of the trauma, we are still caught in the catastrophes, right? It has to be the biggest thing. It has to be the big step. It doesn't. It really are these small things that we can do every day that over time will make a difference in one's life. And they really will. No bullshit. I know that's the 3rd time I've used it. I'm sorry about that, but I got a bad mouth. I've been trying to control it. But it's really these little things that are therapy and lead one to wellness. I just joined a company about a year ago, and they do, for every meeting, they do a meditation before the meeting. We have 5 meetings a day. We'll have 5 meditations. When they first started, I'd be reading or watching, looking at my telephone, or I'd be doing this and another and then I decided, well, maybe I should actually just sit. I can't even sit for like 2 minutes and listen. Those 2 minutes, 5 times a day, have changed my life because I've stopped and I'm thinking about my life. And those little times can make such a difference.
We have one more question, and then we have a couple of resources that people are going to share, and then we will close out. Chris, is your last question? And then
I just had a quick question about the spirituality piece. I know that the documentary touched on it, and I was wondering if you could each share really quickly, like, how does spirituality fit into your sense of wellness for yourselves?
It's at the top of the pyramid, right? And so mental health is just a brick below that. And so physical wellness, support groups, friendships, relationships, all of that is under the umbrella of your spiritual understanding of yourself in the world. For me.
all right. Anybody else? Okay.
She wanted y'all too.
Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So for me, me and my wife talk about this a lot. She calls herself the spiritual gangstress. But one of the things that we kind of code ourselves by, we heard this saying a long time ago that, we are not human beings, right, on a spiritual journey. We're spiritual beings on a human journey. And I think from that lens that we understand that it's the spirit, it's the energy that we mold within inside of us that connects us and leads us into our decision-making process. And so when it comes to spirituality, we look at the world through that particular lens.
My wife and I pray to Mr. and Mrs. God every evening. And when we had our sons and daughters at home, we pray to Mr. and Mrs. God every day. I pray to Mr. and Mrs. God every morning. I cannot say that I am a member, and I'm not going to lie to you, that I'm a member of any particular church. But it's real clear to me that there's no way that any person that I know could have put all of this together. So that's what I look at. And to me, that's the spirituality. And I make sure that my daughters understand that, and my son, that to me there is a Mr. and Mrs. God.
All right, thank you. So we're just going to close with some resources to share with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Blanton. I'm with Lincoln Families.
I just wanted to give a couple of resources. I know that there is a plethora of resources in the room as well, but very specifically, of course, Lincoln and African American Wellness Project are resources that can help connect you to our services and other community-based services in areas that we may not serve. But I did hear very specifically about finding therapists, and so I just wanted to lift up a couple of directories. We all know how hard it is to find a therapist, number one, to find a culturally competent or present therapist, number two, and a Black or BIPOC therapist. I mean, you're sometimes looking for a unicorn. So there have been some directories that have been formulated more recently to kind of address some of that. So in case you don't know, there's inclusivetherapist.com, and that has a huge directory of BIPOC therapists. There is Clinicians of Color, which is a newer therapy directory. There is TherapyDen that also has a lot of therapists of color, and it's also very social justice minded. I want to lift up a newer resource that's still being built, but it's called MEND, M-E-N-D. And this resource is specifically building a directory, but it's for therapists of color who are donating free services to other, I'm going to say BIPOC individuals, but it may be just specifically Black. In the community, with high-skilled training, EMDR, other types of modalities, so that they can do pro bono work with people in the community who otherwise cannot get therapy. So those are just a few resources I wanted to lift up that you can Google and find the websites for to get some additional supports.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. So I want to give our panelists a round of applause. And the executive producer of the film, a round of applause, who were able to bring this to us tonight. And I think I'm sorry. And I thank you all for, I'm sorry. Okay. And I thank you guys all for coming out and hanging with us tonight. I know it's been a long evening. There's some food left. Feel free to eat something on your way out. And once again, thank you for coming and participating. And one more thing, Lincoln Families offers a variety of trainings every month. You can go to the lincolnfamilies.org website to check out our monthly calendars. All right, I missed that.
Oh, man, I appreciate you.